Yeah, sure. And I think one thing that we were just chatting on in the break, and we'll just come back, this is very early days of the system. We always feel like we're late to the game, and it's been around for a while, but this is very, very early days to try and discover how these models work. And I think what was interesting is obviously there's so many people here who share a common interest, but also how many of us have actually matured into doing, the simple best practices inside our business, not very many of us. So there's a great opportunity to actually learn very quickly and get ahead of that curve. I think the other comment that I'll make from my experience in the AT&T Foundry, we have a lot of companies come in. The most interesting companies we speak to are the ones that aren't inheriting the picture of the world from yesterday. They're actually creating new products and new artifacts based on the fact that mobile is very, very different, and monetization of mobile is very, very different. So I just challenge us all here, when we speak about advertising, we have a mental picture of what advertising is, and kind of it goes somewhere from a banner ad up to an interstitial to different mechanisms there. I'm not so sure I understand what advertising is inside the mobile world, actually. And I think the ultimate form of advertising is a mobile app that actually gives me value where I don't understand it's advertising. I'll give you a really simple example of I was speaking to a company that was doing a shopping comparison site. So, the nasty ones that the retail hates, go in, you can barcode it, it comes up. They view, if we start viewing the users we're after as like emotional money units, then the actual CPM they get for their positioning at that point is just about the highest CPM I've ever heard in my whole life. Because at that point, that person is going to make a purchase, and they have a chance to place someone in front of that and actually move that into real commerce for the person behind before them. And that's a completely different opportunity, impossible outside the mobile environment, a different economic completely. So there's almost a balance, I think, that we start to see between true value creation and then deciding how unique is that value, which means, do you go with very open advertising or do you create something different?
It's the old adage that if you ask me to buy something I don't want, it's advertising. But when you introduce me to something I need, it's just information. And increasingly mobile gives us the opportunity to make those decisions and influence our purchasing behavior with information that we have never had. And for many of you, figuring out how your app plugs into that model is an essential component to monetization, which isn't necessarily advertising. We tend to lump the two together, but it isn't necessarily the case. And what are your thoughts on defining success?
Yeah, I think I would share a lot of thoughts that Geoff mentioned. I think the actual definition of success for mobile apps, and we track a large number of them that come to us to try to measure exactly that. I think it's really evolved over the course of the last couple of years even in mobile apps. Maybe about a year ago, success was how many installs has your app had? What's your user base? And then in the press that you would read on TechCrunch or everywhere else, it would be all about this app which has 500 million install base, and everyone would say, wow, that's a successful app. I think those days have changed. I think now people are really focusing on what is the real business that comes out of that application. What is the ROI out of the users that this app has brought into the fold. And really, I think developers we speak to think about three different areas. They think about how effective is my acquisition of customers, how effective is my usage of my application, and how effective is my monetization of my application. And there's metrics around all those three areas, and we can dive into all three. But specifically, when it comes to the acquisition piece, just to start with that, and I understand there were some questions earlier today around if you don't have a very huge install base of users, how do you start doing that? I think a very big question that developers have at the very beginning, before their app has a chance of being successful, is how to actually start acquiring effectively users to begin with. Things that developers do there that we've come across is first making sure that the app works well and as intended. So developing it before they do a marketing push, launching it in a test market, and many developers that will work with launch it in English-speaking markets that are smaller, such as Canada, measuring very carefully the cost of acquisition and the monetization conversion, and effectively the lifetime value of the users. Dividing the two, they get the return on investment, the lifetime value divided by the cost of acquisition. And once that starts getting positive, that's a positive where they're making more money than what it costs to acquire a user, that's when they start actually with more active acquisition campaigns inside the United States, the United Kingdom, and other English and then international markets. Once they do that, then the question is increasingly becoming, I can acquire users from many different channels. Well, which channels are effective? And what is my return on investment by channel? Should I use Facebook? Should I use Flurry? Should I use mobile? Or should I use AdMob? Any of those channels. So that's where a very big area of growth in the field right now exists around channel tracking or user acquisition analytics, where companies are starting to help developers to find out those users that you acquired from this channel, what is really their value and what is really the return on the investment. And developers are becoming increasingly smart around only acquiring customers through the channels that give them positive return on investment. That's an area that we are actually quite active in also.
That raises a couple of questions that we sort of touched on earlier in the day, but let me poll the room real quick. How many of you would consider yourselves startups? So 2/3 of the attendees, that's about right. Given that number, this is a little bit of a leading question, but given that number, is it surprising to you that when asked earlier how many people were using an exchange, only 2 hands went up?
Yeah, a little bit, although it's nascent, very promising, but people are still learning about it. So if you'd like to share a couple thoughts about exchanges.
Well, it's short of making a pitch for exchanges, let's dive into why that's a value-added way for startups, particularly to build audience, to understand who their audience is and how to tell the difference between an advertisement and a monetization strategy.
So right now, up until now, a very popular way of acquiring users has been through networks. You would go as an individual developer to a network like AdMob or iAd. You would basically go to them and say, I want to spend X for every user that you bring to me, and then they would miraculously deliver a certain amount of users to you. You wouldn't know exactly where those users came from. You wouldn't necessarily know the quality of those users. Sometimes you have to work hard to actually get the IDs of the people that were brought to you. So that method works. The difference or the shortcoming of that method is the lack of transparency. I think what marketplaces do is that they give you that transparency, which basically allow you to bid on a particular impression and say, I'm willing to spend X for that particular impression, where I know a lot about that impression, so that you're getting users that are actually the ones that you're looking for. And that's really what the web has enabled in marketplaces, and now increasingly mobile is enabling through marketplaces. So we're seeing a very big growth of the advertising revenue mix shifting towards marketplaces. It used to be only 5 or 10% a year ago. It's probably between 10 and 20% this year. I anticipate that growing more and more in the years to come. And that's important to think in 2 ways, both as an advertiser that wants to acquire users, but even more as a monetizer. If someone wants to make revenue through advertising, you can make your inventory do more for you or earn more revenue for you through advertising by putting it inside mobile exchange, which will allow other demand sources to bid on it, know what it is, and pay you more than you would have gotten from an ad network.
Is that in keeping with what you're seeing, Geoff, in terms of business models?
I'd really stress this comment, actually. Don't acquire bad customers. Acquire good customers. And 2 things happen, actually. They become long-term customers if the proposition matches correctly. And also, what's starting to happen is, and this is where my industry sits a lot, communications is completely changing. So usually what happens is make the applications as interactive as possible, because good customers find good customers through their own networks. And we see tremendous explosion, certainly in communication networks from our point of view.
It sounds to me that what you're saying is that 500,000 users that are the right users is significantly more valuable than 1 million users who you either don't know who they are, they're not sort of handpicked who you know, or their engagement is low for their the value of their life experience.
Yeah, basically. And I think that's what people are increasingly recognizing, both startups and their VCs, quite frankly, that are funding them, Now they're asking the question, what is the lifetime value of the user that you brought to the application? Well, if you think about how you calculate lifetime value, you look at your cost of acquisition, and then you look at what is the retention of those users. So what is the 7-day retention, the 30-day retention? So all the people that are acquired on day one, what percentage have stayed with me 30 days in? And then after that, all those people that were retained, what percentage of them actually made them a purchase inside our application? And then all those people who made a purchase, how much did they spend? And how many of them came back and made a second purchase? These are exactly the metrics that we're seeing as how our developers are decomposing the value equation and seeing exactly what metrics they should be looking at to optimize.
So I'm going to ask one more sort of general question for these guys, but this is the workshop part of this event. So please throw your hand up, ask questions. These guys are the best in the business at answering these. John's got the microphone back there, and we'll hand it out as soon as you have a question. So given that we are trying to identify the right customer, given that there is a difference between a good customer and a bad customer, a difference between advertising and monetization, can we say any more what the value of a click is, or what the value of an impression is, or the value of an acquisition, or does it even matter? Because you're looking at sort of safer metrics of monetization, right? You're looking at lifetime value, and then the stickiness of your app and its social queue, and how much is it shared, and can you drive further downloads leveraged against other IP?
I can start and please jump in. I think the value of a click is not really the right metric, or the value of an impression, but that's so. Even the value of an install, to be honest, is not really that great of a metric. I mean, what's the value of an install if that install does not lead to any further activity by that user? An install, literally what it does on your phone is the equivalent of a bookmark on your browser. It puts something on your phone that if you don't choose to go back to and click on it again, it doesn't mean much other than you have a nice icon on someone's phone on the 5th screen. So really, I think the industry needs a standard when it comes to measuring the value of an engagement, if you will, and no one has officially established it. I think one of the things that we're thinking about at Flurry around it, and we'll talk more about it over time, is the value of a retained user, because effectively that is someone that you acquire that actually matters. They're the person who comes back and uses your application again and again. Maybe they become a viral user that gets you more users. Maybe they become a paying user that pays your bills. So there's the notion of the cost of a 30-day engaged user. So from the moment you acquire them, that they actually came back within 30 days. And we've done some studies around that to figure out by type of channel and by type of ad, whether it's a cost per install ad where you pay per install, or a cost per video view ad where you pay for a video view, or a cost per click. What is the effective, and at the end of the day, what is the cost per engaged user? I think that's something that I think is what people should be measuring as they think about monetization and acquisition.
Once you have that metric in place, if nothing else, as a publisher, you'll know when to say when. You can say, oh, okay, this isn't working. I need to try something else.
Yeah, and if you're a monetizer, and you have the option of serving ads, well, think about what those ads are giving you. If your value per user is more than that, don't serve ads to those users. If the value per user is less than that, that's great. Advertise one of those users, and maybe someone else will be able to be more effective with them from an advertising point. Sure.
So I read a great article actually about what's the most important thing for startups to focus on going forward at the moment. It's no different from what Steve Jobs has spoken about in else. It's violent focus on the delight to your customers. So I agree, transactions, not interesting, but acquiring customers where you build your application or service into their daily habit, and they're returning is an opportunity then to decide how you want to monetize that person. But if you have no value, then it's very hard. As you say, you can't buy that innate value, right? You can fake that value by getting people, but then you can make a lot of noise, and it's not going to be actually focusing you onto a path of success. So, and what's interesting then is let's go into my industry again. Let's decide, is that value replacement value for what is already in the market, or is that unique value as new value? So 2 examples of that in our industry. What's kind of funny is an app called WhatsApp, where basically their value is messaging. It's no different really from the from what's been there for 10 years, but the big difference is it's free. It's a completely different price model. So that's decided how they get in. Their actual acquisition is one that's beautiful because it's through communication, which is their core premise. Versus, say, the application which I thought was great, we bought ice cream from Uber in Palo Alto 2 weeks ago for $30 ice cream barrel. But that was something that we couldn't do before. It's not replacement, it's a completely different model, and they're charging a different price. But notice I'm not really talking in terms of transactions or clicks, or I'm talking in terms of value and customer delight. And I think if we focus down those places, we have a chance to then use the analytics to actually guide us the right way.
And in that equation, that's innovation, right? That's a new product meeting a consumer, being met with delight, resulting in a relationship.
That's reinventing ice cream landscape.
It's nice.
That's huge.
And delicious. And then the growth side of that, the business side of that, is finding a way to monetize it. The question we assume when we have these conversations that all of you have built great apps, that the code is great, the UX is great, that you're probably solving a new problem, and that your product is great and ready for market. Because if we didn't do that, these things would be 3 days long. So to tighten them up a little bit, we just assume that that's true. If it's not, you're going to know by your inability to monetize. But only if you pick the right metric. Only if you think about engagement and your user base in the right way. And pivoting is the hard part, right? Is knowing when you're, to go back to the poker reference from earlier, when you're pop committed versus you can throw it away and start over again. We have any questions, or do you want us to just keep rocking and rolling? Okay, we'll just keep going. We talked a lot about trends today, and one of the interesting themes that came out of the platform panel was it depends. A lot of questions. Well, what do you do with this? What do you do with that? And the answer is always it depends. There's always different things. Are there any hard and fast rules?
Not many, to be honest. So it depends. But I think when it comes to trends, let's pick one particular topic, like maybe within monetization itself. There is an interesting trend that is worth talking about. When you think about monetizing your audience, there's really 3 big strategies that people, well, there's, actually I'll talk about one hard and fast trend on the monetization side that is very hard and fast. It's the in-app purchase phenomenon, the free with in-app purchase phenomenon. So one of the business models that people are deploying to monetize their apps today. So outside of advertising, which we're going to talk more about, there's really 3 that I've seen very popular. One is the free application with in-app purchasing. That means that you get it for free, and then you can buy incremental value. The app basically earns your money over time. The second one is the transaction up front, or the paid apps, where you pay, actually WhatsApp used to be $1 up front, where there was very clear value. Now they recently switched it to free, which is a very interesting decision on their part. And then the third one is subscription, where you are paying the model we've known from our other non-mobile lives, you pay a set fee per month. And that's mostly employed by apps that show very clear value every single month, such as maybe music streaming apps or other news apps, potentially. What's really interesting is that the free model within our purchases is by far the dominant model in mobile applications. And that trend is actually accelerating. Back in 2011 and 2012, if you looked at all the apps that were tracking inside Flurry, 82% of them were free within our purchases. If you look at, in this last year, 2013, 90% of them are free within our purchases. So even more and more are actually moving to this free within our purchase model. And even we've determined that when people have done a test, where they've released their app free within our purchase or paid, after they made the test, the overwhelming majority moved the app to free within our purchase. So that's a very interesting trend as you think about your business model you send for your application. At the end of the day, users in mobile, whether we like it or not, are accustomed to getting things for free. But then what they are also accustomed to is getting delighted by the apps, to your point, by the apps that are being presented to them. And they're very willing, if you actually demonstrate clear value, to give you the revenues, but you need to earn it. So that's an important trend that as you think about your mobile monetization strategy.
Yeah, where would you classify sort of the fourth option, which is, for lack of a better word, the offline monetization? Think of it as Uber, right? The app is free, the service comes with a payment, but there's a premium charged on that kicks back to the service itself, as well as the data set that Uber is able to monetize. Everybody would agree that it's a great product, it's innovative, it created a new market, some of us can't live without it. Almost ad nauseum that we talk about it at conferences like this, but their monetization is none of those things. It's the other piece. And true success for apps that aren't necessarily for everybody, more of a niche audience, is multi-tier revenue generation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a very unique model. I'm a huge fan of the Uber service, especially Uber X, actually, most recently.